Loopcloud. Loopcloud is incredible because you work with samples, and there are over 4 million samples in Loopcloud to work with. So no matter what you're producing, you can find what you're looking for inside of Loopcloud. So today, we're going to continue with the track we started yesterday. We're going to add some vocals, some new drums, some percussion, and some other elements. Then we're going to begin to sketch out an arrangement for the track, do some mixing, and then hopefully get some mastering done towards the end. And then we can, okay. But anyway, let's jump into it. So this is where we were before, when we ended the day yesterday. Pretty basic track. I've done a few things in between then and now. I've rendered the piano to audio just so we have it. Another thing that I've done here is I took the initial scaler that we used to get our chord progression and just saved it. Up here, I've turned it off just in case we ever want to go back and tweak anything else out, just to have that information there in the future. So Loopcloud is right here. It's a VST that connects to the Loopcloud application. So as soon as I drag and drop that inside of Ableton Live, this shows up. I can just close that and then open up Loopcloud. This is the Loopcloud application. This is like a massive sample loop sound library. Like I said, there are over 4 million sounds here of so many different genres, even really niche things like if you want wind chimes from, you'll probably find it in the library. The first thing to notice is down here, it says connected to Ableton Live. So when it's connected, it's synced up, and you'll see that our BPM inside Ableton Live is automatically updated here in Loopcloud. So no matter what I load inside of the Loopcloud track system down here at the bottom, it will be synced with my project tempo, and I can actually play that project in Ableton Live synced with the loops from Loopcloud. So the first thing we're going to do is, if you remember, we were working in F sharp minor inside of scalar. So what I'm going to do is look for a vocal in that key and see if there's something inside of Loopcloud that fits the track we're working on. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new search tab here and come into instruments. And over here, we've got one called vocal. And it's immediately going to show me a bunch of different vocals here. If you look over here on the right, we can actually get more focus. So like I said, we're working in F sharp minor. So I've got F sharp here, click minor, and now I'm only going to see vocals in F sharp minor. And it's saying there's 1,666 different options to choose from. So we can actually get things down a little bit further by clicking match tempo. When you click match tempo, it's going to get rid of BPMs that are too far away from what we're working with, and it's really going to narrow things down. So now I'm down to 52 results, and pretty much everything in here is going to sound really great with the track we're working on. I'm going to go one step further and just type in dry up here, because I want to work with a vocal that isn't affected. Remember from yesterday, dry means unaffected or unprocessed. I want to add my own reverb, my own delay, so we can just try a few of these out. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and load up this one. And if I pull the start position over.
Which way will I take? Which road?
This is the vocal. And if I jump back into Ableton Live.
Take? Which road will bring me back to home? A thousand pathways, so far from where I wanna be, so far from.
You'll see that it's fitting very well melodically with the chords that we have from yesterday. And it was very, very simple to find. And we had many, many more options before I typed in a little bit more, narrowing my results with dry and so on. But we're going to stick with this vocal for this project. But just know that you can go, I mean, there are just so many. There's singing, there are spoken word acapellas, there are rap vocals if that's what you're into. Literally everything is inside of here. You're going to love it. Also, as I said, I'm working in F sharp minor, but there's also a key lock feature inside of Loopcloud, which you can turn on, and then no matter what you load, if say it's in C, it will automatically pitch shift it for you into the key you're working with, so you don't even need to worry about that in the end. But I'm happy that I found this vocal, so we're just going to keep moving. Track 2, as I said yesterday, we're going to change out the drum. So I'm going to actually jump back into Ableton here and just deactivate the drum plugin and come back in. And this time, inside of instruments, we can go to kick. Okay, and we can search by genre as well. This is kind of a chill out vibe. So I could just put in chill out here. Another thing I could do was turn it down or narrow it down by loops. So there are loops and one shots that live inside of Loopcloud. A one shot would just be one kick that then I can create my own pattern with, and a loop will be something that is sequenced for me, pre-made, and I can find it, and of course I can edit it later, but we're just going to go ahead and search for loops for now. Jump back over here, and again, match tempo. Match tempo is usually going to be your friend, just so you're not time stretching too much too often, but Loopcloud does a really great job time stretching things anyway. So let's try out a few of these kicks and see if there's anything that sounds good out of the gate.
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back to home? A thousand pathways, so far from where I wanna be. So far from, so far from, so far from.
All right, so that one's good enough for now. I'm going to just turn it up down here on the channel, flip over to track 3, and open up a new search tab. And after kicks, we can do snares. And essentially do the same thing again. I can come into genre, do something crazy, future based. All right, again, jump over here, match tempo, and just check out a few of these now. Also, you can look at the waveform here. This is a snare, but it's looking more like a snare fill, which isn't really going to be what I'm looking for right now. I'm looking for something that's happening pretty consistently.
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back to home? A thousand pathways, so far from where I wanna be. So far from, so far.
All right, so that will work. Let's go over to track 4, and now, and I apologize again, I'm going very quickly, but I want to get through everything today in under an hour. So again, this will be archived on YouTube if you want to go back and refollow the process step by step there. But I'm going to come into instrument, and now I'm going to go for top. So a top line inside of Loopcloud, and just general producer speak, is percussion, hi-hats, sort of a mix of everything that you put on top of your kick and the snare. Usually it won't have a kick and a snare, so it's really fun just to mix and match these things. But now we're just going to do that again. We can narrow things down by genre, maybe hip hop this time. Jump in over here, and I can do match tempo. And we can just start playing with these until we find something that sounds good with what we're working with.
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back to home? A thousand pathways, so far from where I wanna be. So far from, so far from, so far from where I wanna be. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Now I hear.
All right, so we've completely replaced the drums that we had yesterday, and in a matter of no time. I'm going to keep going here. Inside of Loopcloud, there's also a favoriting system, which you can do things like sort by favorite. So you can see I've already favorited that. Or I can actually come over here, and I'll see everything that I've favorited up to this point. And what I'm going to do is just load up another kick here. It's kind of like a cinematic style kick.
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back to home? A thousand pathways.
I actually really like the way it's creating an extra groove on the low end there, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that. I am going to take the loop brace. This is the length of the loop, and this is the endpoint. So now instead of playing that entire section, it gets a little bit busier over here. It's just going to loop back around and play that for me, and that's what I'm looking to do. Another thing that's important when you're working in Loopcloud or using Scalar to create an idea is worry about mixing later. If you've got sort of a creative flow going, you just want to get it out as soon as you can, or at least that's my approach. And I'll worry about frequency collisions and masking and these sorts of things later in the process, where it's more of a technical kind of you got to get it done sort of thing, rather than feeling the energy of what you're working on and getting it down, getting the idea down. Same thing with sort of fills or transitions. These things are actually quite easy, but getting the idea down on paper or in Loopcloud or in Ableton is just really my focus, and I would suggest to you to make it your focus when you start making your project. I'm going to keep moving here. Come over here, and this now I'm just going to add an effect. So we've got effects. We've got all of these different types. Look how many different effects there are. So many different things. I'm just going to go for whoosh because I liked saying it, whoosh. And again, we can filter by favorite. I have one here. I'm going to load it up. So it's essentially a big explosion. If I solo that track, which just means I only want to hear that while I'm working on it, it's really massive. It's cinematic. I dig it. So the first thing I want to do is actually zoom out here and make the loop longer than it already is. Bring it over here. This is actually a one shot, but I want it to loop in time with the project I'm working on, so I can just change that loop brace, move it over, and we should be good to go. Another thing you might notice is it's not on time at the moment. It's kind of got like a lead up. So I can take my play cursor and put that over here. And what that's going to do is now, because I have it looped at 8 bars, it will actually start here, and I'll still get the sort of lead up to the explosion, and it will sound in time and more, it'll fit better within the track itself. So if I unsolo,
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back to home? 1,000 pathways, so far from where I wanna be, so far from.
all right. Now that's way too loud. Just going to go ahead and turn it down. I'm also going to come into Loopcloud's effects. Loopcloud comes with a suite of effects. And if I add the effects right here, you see we've got a compressor, delay, EQ, filter, a really cool grain stretch, panning ability, reverb, stop, reverse, vinyl stop, and then tone box. So there's a lot of different effects in here. What I'm looking for is a filter, just because the explosion is meant to accent here. It's not meant to be a cinematic explosion where something is blowing up. It's just meant to be almost like a crash, but instead of using a crash symbol, which is used over and over and over again, we're just going to use an explosion instead. So I'm going to take my filter, and what a filter does is, depending on the filter mode or type, will either remove things below or above where you set your cutoff frequency. So I brought my cutoff frequency to around 200 hertz, and if I play it now, let me solo it again. You can see that all of that frequency information in the upper end of the spectrum is gone, but I actually want to do the reverse of that. So what I can do is just take this mode and turn it to a high pass filter, which means everything above the cutoff position that I've chosen here will be allowed to pass through, hence high pass, and everything lower will be filtered out and won't be present in the mix. Okay, so because we're using that in conjunction with kicks, in conjunction with the bass line, as I said yesterday, we really want to try to keep the low end focused and not have too much going on, just so it sounds better on big speakers and it sounds better on people's cell phones, because that's where most people are consuming media these days. So if I unsolo now,
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back to home? 1,000 pathways, so far from where I wanna be.
it's sounding sounding pretty good. Let's listen to what that in conjunction with the stuff we made yesterday.
Which road will bring me back to home? A thousand pathways, so far from where I wanna be. So far from, so far from, so far from where I wanna be. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Now I hear calling home. Am I wrong?
So we're really coming along now. You're going to want to do that playing with the music and Loopcloud at the same time. But again, because I'm trying to keep this as streamlined as possible, I just completely did it all in Loopcloud without really bouncing back and forth. But the cool thing about Loopcloud is you do have that ability. And believe me when I say I was doing that when I was creating this project a few weeks ago for this demonstration. So it's absolutely phenomenal. The next thing we want to do is get this information into Ableton so we can begin to mix there, we can make arrangements, we can do some editing and so forth. So over here we have an export option. And if I click right here, we can decide what we want to bring into Ableton Live. The current mix would be everything together in one file, the original file, the processed current track, so that right now current track will be the one I have selected, or the processed separate files. What processed means is it will keep that filter there. If I have a reverb anywhere, it will keep that filter. It will be baked into the sound. But I'm going to go ahead and just choose original separate files and just work with everything inside of Ableton Live. But obviously, if you've done a lot of processing, process separate files might be the way to go. So I'm going to click right here, it's going to download, it's going to process, and if I click and drag, it will automatically close. If I hold Control, it will add those to separate tracks, and now I can work with it inside of Ableton Live. So I'm actually going to come in here and just deactivate Loopcloud so we're not doubling up on everything, and just go ahead. These are loops in time with the project, so I can just drag those out. Now, because I dragged in the original file, I have to come into, say, this whoosh and move the play position just like I did inside of Loopcloud. Turn it down again. I'll need to add a filter again. That would be inside of the EQ. EQ8 is fine. And just, it's essentially the same thing. High pass filter. High pass the same as low cut. You'll hear it said both ways. And just type in 200 Hertz again. And sounds exactly the same. Now, because we made it a 8-bar loop before inside of Ableton Live, we can do that over here. This is the length of the loop. And now I can just drag that out, and we've got those explosions happening every 8 bars, exactly what we were looking to do. The last thing I want to do is, again, I did some manipulation to the vocal before. What I'm doing here is just setting that play cursor to the very left-hand side because I know it's already synced, turning on warp, and because the original vocal was at 145, you can actually see that here in the title. So that information is brought from Loopcloud for us into Ableton Live. It's very helpful. We can actually come in here and change it here because by default, it's going to change it to our project BPM, which is 150, but we want that vocal to happen at 145. And again, play cursor over, so it starts just like it did when we had it in Loopcloud. Now, I'm going to turn it up. Now, another thing that's kind of outside of the scope of this course or this masterclass is the warp method inside of Ableton Live. For a vocal or for something kind of heavily mixed, if it's a pad with a synth, or even if it's just a pad, if you're moving it outside of its original BPM, you want to use Complex Pro. It's the most advanced algorithm for melodic content, and it will just make things sound better. Which way will I take? Which road will So we're well on our way here. I'm going to go ahead and just delete Loopcloud drum because we have our other drums now.
Which way will I take?
Now is when we're going to start mixing and thinking about how things sound inside of the project as a whole. So the first thing I would do is I actually have two snares happening from these two different loops. And it's actually too much. It's hitting really hard, which could be a good thing, could be what you're looking for. But for me, with a chill out track, I think it's too much. So what I would do is figure out which snare I like more. That one's pretty weak and pretty short. And that's the more dominant one. So what I would do is I'd come in, I would select that loop in Ableton Live, and I actually have another window over here. If I click right here, I have access to different controls on a clip-by-clip basis. And what I'm just going to do is I've got gain selected here on the clip, and I can see my pencil tool. That's Control B. And I'm just going to come in and make some changes just to where the snare is happening. And I'm going to add a little bit of variety here. I want the second snare just to hit a little bit harder, so that's why I'm making this sort of stepped pattern here. Well, let's listen to that soloed for a second. So you can hear how it's quieter than it was before, and if we listen to it with the other snare now, it's not as overpowering or overbearing inside of the mix.
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back?
There's another thing that I hear in this that I don't like. It sticks out to me when I listen to everything together, and it's like a bongo or a con. I don't know what exactly it is. So what I'm going to do is get rid of it. There are a couple of different ways to get rid of it, but I'm just going to use Ableton Live's EQ8 and just do a kind of harsh, let's get rid of the entire thing as much as possible with leaving most of the rest of the signal. So what we can do, I'm just going to go ahead and turn off some of these frequency bands. Inside of Ableton Live, frequency bands, whether or not they're being used, take up CPU. So you want to really only have activated the ones you're going to be using. And what I'm going to do is pull this up like this, and then adjust the Q value, which changes how wide or narrow that filter will be, and just search around until I find that sound I don't like. You can actually make that a little bit bigger. You can actually see it. If you look right here in the frequency spectrum, you can actually see it happen. So you can hear there, obviously it's way too loud, but you can really hear the frequency, the resonance that I hear and I don't like. So now that I've kind of zeroed in on it, I just take my gain and flip it around. So we went from that to that. Now, if I had more time, I might dial it in a little bit more. I also might use a dynamic EQ, which uses sort of a compressor type technology to only take away that sound when it happens and leaves that frequency range when it's not happening, but that would take too much time for now. But let's listen to it now inside of the mix.
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back to home? 1,000.
Much better. Next thing I'm going to do is, again, remember we had made this a little bit shorter, so I'm going to take my loop brace right here, move it over, and get rid of that busy part in the second section. Cool.
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back?
Also, the vocal is dry.
Which way will I take?
So what we can do is remember the send from yesterday where we set up the reverb and delay on the return track. We can now just take it.
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back to home? A thousand pathways. So far from where I wanna be. So far from, so far from, so far from where I wanna be. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Now I hear calling home. Am I wrong?
Okay. A couple of other things I would do here. You can see visually that this is quieter than this. And that's because this was made for a different track, right? The vocal came with other elements. It wasn't meant to be the way I have it here. But what I can do is just very quickly highlight this, and if I click and just drag for a second, it will make its own section of the clip here, and I can take the gain for the clip and just pull it up a little bit. And we can see visually without even listening that this is more in line here. Maybe this section could even come up a little bit more. Again, just take it and move it, bring it up, and now we can listen, and hopefully it's a little bit more even.
Which way will I take? Which road will bring me back to home? A thousand pathways. So far from where I wanna be. So far from, so far from, so far from where I wanna be.
Cool. Let's keep going and make some more alterations here. Again, I'm going to come into the clip gain for this. You can see that I'm on the EQ8 gain. That's not what I want. I want the clip gain. And I'm actually just going to go to my pointer tool here, double click to add a point. I'm just going to remove that last one, because if you look right here, again, seeing the waveforms, and you can see them inside of Loopcloud as well, they're so much help. I can see that the snare that was being doubled up stops here, and it just sounds a little bit weird. So what I've done is just remove that snare and kind of faded it out, and it will actually help to let the listener know that it's the next 8 bars, and usually you're going to be adding or taking away every 8 to 16 bars. So it's just an auditory cue for people to know that something's about to happen, sort of a dropout, or where you could actually add a fill, some extra percussion.
So far from where I wanna be. So far from.
So hopefully you're able to hear that there. And we can just keep moving. So we've started to mess around with mixing a little bit. Let's mess around with arrangement. So we've got this choir here that sounds like this. What I'm going to do is actually come in here. Maybe that's too much. I want that to come in here and not happen before then. And I'm actually going to go ahead and duplicate it. And it's just helpful to name things. So I'm going to turn this one to mid. And let's work on the high for now. And we're going to start talking about automation here. Automation is having things change over time inside of your project. And so much is automatable. But the only thing I want to automate for this project is scalar to come on when this part of the vocal happens. Okay, so I'm going to come in here, and if I press A, I got to remove the keyboard first, but now I can see my automation lanes. And if I just come over here and turn it on and turn it off, it will automatically go to that automation parameter. And I can just come in here and do this. So now scalar will be off here. If I put this in my timeline and you look down here to the on-off switch for scalar, you'll see that it's off. And then if I come over here, you'll see that it's on.
So far from where I wanna be. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Now I hear calling home.
All right, we're doubling up now. That's my fault. So I'm going to turn that one off. We're actually going to do something different from that. But so essentially what we've just done is added a choir rhythm behind sort of the drop-ish part or the chorus or the hook, whatever you want to call it, of that vocal, and they really gel well together. So for this other choir, what I'm going to do is come in, turn it on, solo it. I'm going to remove the performance. I'm going to highlight everything, drop it down an octave. It just sounds so good. You gotta love it. I'm going to turn off the loop. I'm going to click. I'm going to add that right there. I'm going to freeze it just because I'm looking to work with the audio here. All right, so that didn't work well. What I can do is take it, freeze it. Great. And if I flatten it, remember it'll give me the audio. And now I can take that and put it where I wanted it. And if I remove my automation by hitting A on the keyboard, I can actually take fades here. Zoom in a little bit. And I want that to come in a little bit slowly. And then fade out. And I want to bring the volume way down. So here we have two choirs of the same choir, but here it's a steady chord, which will build up. And then when the sort of drop happens, the choir will go into a rhythmic pattern, an octave above, and we'll just have a little bit more of a dynamic change rather than just having one or the other inside of the project. So if we look at that inside of the context of the track.
So far from where I wanna be. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Now I hear calling home.
It sounds a little bit better. It's a little bit more interesting, I think. Turn it up a little bit. Some other things we can do, again, because it's sort of the drop, we're going to have those choirs come in. We can come in and just do a quick fill with some of the percussion here. We can remove the kick. Let's find where that kick is. Where is the kick? Oh, it's right here. Okay, so let's just get rid of this. Get rid of this. Maybe, I don't know, duplicate this.
Now I hear calling home.
All right, so just a little bit more interesting. Again, it's good for the person listening, especially if you're going to get into doing sort of EDM or club music where you've got massive build-ups. It's good to let the listener know it's about to happen, just so people can be prepared and excited and jump around.
Now I hear calling home.
Another thing we'll need to do is, if you remember yesterday, we did sidechain compression for the bass line to the kick with Loopcloud drum, but now we have a new kick. So we need to all we need to really do is get the audio from here and find that kick inside of the project, which is on right here. And the settings should be more or less the same.
Now I hear calling home.
And we're well on our way. We've got a decent idea by way of arrangement. We've got sort of a build up. Things happen more here. I think it could use with a little bit more happening for the drop. I'm calling it a drop, but I don't really think it is. If I come into my favorites that I have over here, I have this ride symbol. If I just click and drag that into Ableton, I can have it inside of here, and then I can work with it as well. So it's that easy to get files inside of here. I'm going to turn it way down. And I want it to happen off beat. And I want it to loop. So I can just do this. And what I'm going to do is actually pan it a little bit to the left, and the lead sort of pluck that we have from play, I'm going to pan it a little bit to the right. Now, cool thing about panning from a mixing standpoint is you can actually have things sound good, and if you pan something a little bit to the left, you can actually bring the volume down on the mix, and it will still sound the same volume. It's pretty crazy, but it's a good way to be able to not overwhelm the center audio just by using little tricks like panning. So let's listen to what that sounds like here. All right. The last thing I want to do before we get into the mastering portion is add some automation to our pluck over here. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to open it up, and let's solo it. So again, for our drop, to add more of a change, more of an impact, the lead, this pluck can actually come up further in the mix, take more room, because the vocal is kind of just a looping sort of glitched out vocal rather than an actual, phrase or sentence. So what I would do is adjust the amp decay rate and make it a lot more open here. And then over here towards the front, I would pull it down, not that much. So it will go from this, and then you can hear how it's more open, it's a bigger sound, and that's what we're looking for. Inside of Ableton Live, if I hold Alt on my automation lane, I can make it a curved automation. So that will gradually begin to happen while this choir is gently in the background saying, hey, something's coming, swelling up. And now we'll also accent that effect by opening up the amp envelope until the actual drop.
So far from, so far from, so far from where I wanna be. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Now I hear calling home.
That's probably too much. I got a little bit too excited there. I apologize. Bring it down. And then we can get rid of that. Just do some other real quick things here. Come into scaler. We're going to have it here, but I want it to shut off for this. Let's see. go. That's good enough. So I'm just going to go ahead. Now we're going to get into the mastering portion. We're going to be using a great mastering suite, which you should all have on your computers, called Ozone9. It's from Izotope. It's world renowned for its quality. It is leaning towards the professional side of things, but it's got some new technology inside of it that actually does a lot of the work for you. So what I'm going to do is actually export this file and then bring it into a new session, just so we're not overwhelmed with everything. We don't go back and make small changes. We can really just focus on getting the final product to sound good. So what I'm going to do is just come in here, pull down the volume. So I'm pulling down the volume and I'm adding what's called headroom. And if you ever get to the point where you're going to be exporting your mix to get mastered, you're generally going to want around 6 dB of headroom. That's what they'll tell you. It could be up to 10. But essentially you just don't want any red line happening on your VU meter or the funny colored lines over here. Which way will I take? It's all green, so we're all gravy. So the next thing I would do is also just pull this over, just so I can get any reverb tails that might happen. Come into File, Export Audio. I'm just going to leave it as is. Export to the desktop. Call it day 2. And let that happen. Any questions so far? We've got a microphone. Nothing?
So you said in the end,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to make the track bigger, do you recommend to make, I don't know how to express it, to make double, like the kicks only, not vocals? I cannot really express it.
Yeah, I'm not double the kick, or
So we have the vocals, we have nice track. If you want to make it longer,
you're right. So this is obviously a very short song. I mean, just because of time, we can only get so far. It's very common to have like this. If we just had that one vocal to duplicate that twice, you want to be careful when you're just duplicating things because it can kind of stale. So that's why you would maybe change up the lead melody, or you would change up the synth sounds, or you would add a different style of drum groove. You'd want to change something. But yeah, you would usually duplicate that. These days, it depends on, again, what type of music you're making, but pop, usually you'll hear the hook in the first 20 seconds. They're around 3 minutes long now. I remember, when I started, pop tracks were like 4 minutes, but now people are just so hungry just to, so I mean, you gotta think about. But if you're making the music that you love to listen to, then you'll already have a general sense of how long it should be, how often it should change, how big the change should be, things like that. But inside of a DAW, for me to duplicate the length of this track, so right now it's 50 seconds long. For me to duplicate it, I would just take the entire thing here and just Command D, and now my track is 2 minutes long. And it's that simple. And everything will be saved. Your automation will be saved. Any edits you've made, you'll see that my drop is still the same. And then you could just go from there and make subtle differences or big differences. It depends on what you want to do and what style you're making.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is just come in and save this. Open up a new live set. And I can just come in here to the WAV file, drag it in here, and this is our song. So now the fun part, this is where you would get loud stuff. That's what everybody likes. I'm just going to type in Ozone and come into plugins. And we've got Izotope Ozone9. So what we can do here is we can jump into presets. This is a mastering suite. Just like I was talking about yesterday with Lifeline Expanse and Spaced Out, it's one plugin, but you actually get multiple plugins. If I hit right here, we get all of these are all separate VST plugins that are just contained in this suite of one giant plugin. So we've got a dynamic EQ, compressor, a couple of equalizers, just lots to choose from. But what I'm going to do is just we come into presets and just get like all-purpose mastering and just flip through a few of these to see what it sounds like. When you are deciding on the best loudness of your track, these are all things that you're going to have to do a lot of work. A lot of people don't do their own mastering just because it is like people go to college for years to do it. Izotope have made it really easy to do with the mastering system. We're going to get into that in a second. But what you want to do is go to the drop or the busiest, most activated part of your track and just loop it, just so you don't want to make your track really loud while listening to the quietest part of your track, because then when you get to the loud part, it will be too loud, right? I'm just going to Control L to loop that. And let's check out a few of the presets. So you can hear there that there are some of them are very big changes, some of them are very small. They are all really kind of transforming the overall picture of the track we're working on. But they are, as it says here, sort of all-purpose mastering. And as with all presets, you should look at presets as really, really valuable starting points. And then you can go in when you got something close to what you're looking for and make further adjustments to get exactly what you're looking for. That's the same with a synth preset that has a certain sound, or with a mastering or mixing. Presets get a bad rap for some reason, but they are so valuable to get things done quickly and just help you get to where you're going faster. I mean, it just makes sense. But the cool thing about Izotope's Ozone9 and actually most of their newer products is they have these assistants. And what this does, if I click here, will actually listen to the audio we have. We'll give it a few sort of ideas or steer it in the right direction, and then it will give us a custom preset for our track. Rather than a preset that was made for a hip-hop track, it will just listen to the dynamics of our track, the EQ balance, and just say, hey, check this out. And in terms of presets, it's going to be better than using a general all-purpose one because it was actually custom made by AI for our track in particular. It's like magic. So we can decide over here if we want to go for a modern feel or a vintage feel. I'm going to leave it on modern. We can do a manual, which will listen to the track, or we can actually load in a track, say or a track that's already been professionally mixed. It sounds similar to ours or in the same genre that we really like the overall audio characteristics of it. We can load that in and we'll use that. We can also decide the intensity at which it's going to process the track, and then we can decide the destination. So streaming or CD. If you're going to be uploading your track to iTunes or Spotify or YouTube, you want to stick with streaming. If you're going to be going on CD, it's going to give you a louder product. A lot of people like louder just in general. You can try that out as well. I'm going to stick with streaming just because we are actually streaming right now. It just makes sense. And I'm going to hit next, and it's going to say, wait for you to play your audio. And just like I said a minute ago, we want to play the busiest part of our track so it can listen to that and make decisions based on that information rather than a quiet part. I'm also going to turn down the speakers here in the studio because it can pop and get really loud before it actually makes decisions on the output. So we'll just turn it down and come in here. And there you go. It's done it for us. It recognized that we had exported with a lot of headroom, so it's pulled the threshold of the maximizer. This is the module that makes things loud. It's pulled it way down, so we're getting a decent amount of gain reduction, which brings up low values to make it sound louder. It's also added a dynamic EQ with a number of modules. And again, we can come in and change these. We can remove them. We can add more. We can do whatever we want. And the same with the EQ curve. It said I have too much bass. That's ridiculous. You never have enough bass. So I could come in here and just turn that off if I wanted. And we still have all of the other elements or modules at our disposal if we want to go in and do a like a sort of post EQ, sort of a surgical job. There maybe might be too much resonance in that lead because I really opened up the decay on it before. We can get rid of that here. We can lower that here. We can do so much, and it's all available inside of this one plugin. So you guys are going to love this, especially when you jump in and start learning the ropes. But let's just listen to the before and after here. So there's a big difference. And the last thing I'm going to touch on today is just, it's a really big difference. And just a natural phenomenon that if it's louder, your brain will be tricked into thinking it's better. Okay, so that's why they've included this thing called gain matching. And this will just make the relative volume of the before and the after the same. So you can really concentrate on what's actually changed between the two. Because if you just bypass back and forth with them being such a big difference in output volume, you will almost always favor the one that's louder. And this is just a sort of general mixing and mastering tip. Mix and master quiet. You're going to have plenty of time to put it in your car or on your system or in the club and make it really loud where you can feel it. But when you're trying to decide, you know, what belongs on the left, what belongs on the right, what should come down and the mix go be in the front, you're going to want to have it at a volume like this. We don't have it too loud, where we can really focus on those things rather than just trying to be like, oh, that's awesome. You know what I mean? So here we go. So for me, I hear the higher end, and you can see it clearly here in the EQ, is brighter. It's more present. I can also hear the lower end is tighter. We do have these dynamic EQ nodes. These two are really focusing in on that sort of harsh resonant tone from that lead that I didn't have enough time to clean up when we were actually mixing the track. And what's this one doing? So again, this dynamic EQ is like a regular EQ, but just a lot more precise. What we can do is remove that the high end. So you can see here on the EQ, we've actually pushed the mid highs and the actual highs up pretty like a lot. But over here in the dynamic EQ, we're bringing down the ultra highs, but only when that ride is happening. So what the dynamic EQ has heard is that it's too much with the ride, but when the ride comes in, just every time it happens, it'll push it down, and then it will come up and allow everything else to breathe. And it's just a much more surgical way of doing EQ. I wish I had more time to show you because I prefer a dynamic EQ over a regular EQ just in general, but too little time. That's pretty much where I'm going to leave it for now. I hope that wasn't too quick. And any questions? And I'm going to look on my cell phone to see if there are any questions in Miami. Miami, if you're watching, send the questions. Nothing? No? That means I did a great job. Or a really bad job. I don't know what's happening. I see no messages from Miami. Okay, well, it's been a blast. I had a great time coming to Berlin and seeing all of you and meeting all of you. And thanks to Microsoft and Beatport for having us. This has been Originals². I'm Joshua Casper, and thanks for coming. We will see you in the next video. Thank you.